Well, hello out there. This is Sam Kilmer from Fintech Hustle, your host, managing director at Cornerstone Advisors, and I'm joined today by some real rock stars on this episode of Fintech Hustle. Let me go ahead and introduce them a little bit to you to get going. First of all, Kelley Michalik, who is the Chief Commercial Officer of Lumen Digital. I think Kelly's been at Lumen Digital now for a couple of years. I know we're not really here to talk too much about companies, but I think it's been a really interesting journey for Kelley, which she'll probably tell you a little bit more about. They have had a real interesting last year or two, coming out of the initial, I guess you would say, seeding or startup from Valera into a couple of major funding rounds with like Light Street and New View Partners Group, a list of the who's who of some major credit unions in the industry that have been investors in Lumen Digital. I think something like 20 credit unions or whatever. I mean, it's been a really interesting round. I think what's another interesting thing about Kelley, coming to this industry, we tend to think of the fintech industry as an insular crowd, or, like I started out in banking and I've kind of been institutionalized in this business. And Kelley came from technology, but travel, HR, basically coming into fintech from outside. And so welcome, Kelley.
I appreciate it. And now that I'm in this industry, I would never want to be anywhere else. That's for sure. That others say that, but nothing compares. So I'm so happy to be part of fintech, and I'm happy to be here today.
That happens to all of us, by the way. We get sucked into the industry and we never leave.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of which, let me also introduce my co-host with the most today, Kelli Schultz. That's right. You just heard two Kellys. We're 50% of our group today is a Kelley, different spelling, but we have Kelly and Kelli. Kelli Schultz from Cornerstone Advisors, and Kelly's background in fintech is also just very storied in the sense that some of you may have heard of the Association for Financial Technology. At one point, Kelley was the president of AFT, but she was also the president of Allied Payments, which some of you may have heard recently. Speaking of deals, Allied Payments acquired by Autobooks, I think a month or two or so back. But Kelley was also a president at Venminder, I think a co-founder as well. And also iPay. You were an executive at iPay, which through the acquisition by Jack Henry way back when, and kind of when the core providers were really getting into the payment space originally in a big way. And see, what did I miss in there, Kelley? I mean, other than you're a principal at Cornerstone Advisors.
I got 3 kids, 4 animals in the house, but no, that you're spot on. And it's just been a really fun ride, a great journey. And, I love this industry.
Yeah, it shows. And so thanks for being the co-host today. And our other guest, last but not least, certainly, Stephen Baker, who's the CEO of Connective. And again, in the spirit of, we've already been talking about deals, both in terms of funding rounds and investors with Lumen Digital and all the deals that Kelley has been involved with over the years. Man, Stephen, Connective has been in a lot of deals. I mean, when I think about the last couple of years, I mean, you came together as a company by way of deals. I mean, CFM and Nextsoft and IMM all sort of coming together as a mashup. Probably not the way you would describe it, but give me a little rope there. And then you had more recently you've had, Datava and Epic River. And I think you also had kind of coming into 2023 or 2024, a couple of backer, some private equity backers and Ocean Sound and TA and some others out there that are involved. So it's the deal episode, I guess. It wasn't planned that way, but deal episode. So welcome to Fintech Hustle.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate it, Sam. Happy to be here. I also, like Kelley, happy to be in fintech. I think I'm celebrating. I think I just clicked 2 years in May, and I was sort of one foot in with a payments company in the real estate space before, but I'm really enjoying working with financial institutions. It's a great market. I understand why you guys, you get sucked in and don't get out.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, you're right. Yeah, I was thinking about that. You and Kelly both, because it was the finance, so it's also real estate market, right? It was a real estate market, finance.
Prop tech, fintech kind of crossover. So I was one foot in and then kind of came all the way in with
Yeah.
this.
And Stephen, super interesting, but that property management piece, and the payments piece around that you did, I actually got a little bit kind of adjacent to that and had a little bit of that inside of the bill payment business for a while. And it was very interesting. We were very tempted to run off and chase that numerous times.
Yeah. I think
Glad
you
to
should
see
be glad
somebody
you didn't.
tackle it well.
Many have died on that field. It's a tough one. Yeah.
Well, and
I'm not going to say it's a land war in Asia, but it's kind of on that dimension.
well, yeah, and I mean, listen, just to kind of jump in here a little bit, I'll just throw out just the Kelli Schultz, to your point about the kind of connection of the real estate market and the fintech market. Look at just this week, the valuation of Built in kind of the, I guess you call it the loyalty space and the rental market space.
Yeah.
And I think they were valued at bordering on $11 billion on what appears to be, growing. I think they're headed towards $1 billion in revenue next year, but that's a forecast. I think
that thing's a
hundreds of millions right now.
We saw that. We saw Built pop up. It was only 5 years ago where they really became a brand. Now you walk through O'Hare Airport, they've got 10-foot long ads. And I'm like, geez, is that the same company? They're an absolute rocket ship. They tapped into a really exciting, I think everybody was excited to get on that bandwagon.
Kelli Schultz, what'd you think about when you saw that one? What'd you think about that?
I just think, crazy multiples. Just at that size, to drive multiples that high at that size. It's one thing for a smaller company to drive multiples, like that, on a smaller revenue scale, but at that size to still be driving that kind of multiple is just insane. It's unheard of.
I think it's reflective, at least in part. Everybody wants a piece of rental payments. It's the biggest thing most people pay every month. And Chase is after it. They've spent money. They've kind of spun up joint ventures. Everybody's chased it. Built has gone after it and tapped into it in a way I don't think anyone has in 10 years, And so I think that's what we're seeing. And they're frankly just kind of tapping the surface, right? If you look at what could be, and they've developed all the partnerships you need. So I think that's probably what they're getting paid for. They're already at the places you need to be to do loyalty for real estate, and they can expand that market a great deal. If I was underwriting it, that's what I'd look at.
It's really interesting. I was trading notes yesterday with John Meyer on our team. He's done some writing over at Gonzo Banker about the real estate market and risk. And, he was a strategy officer and product officer over at Abrigo. We had a chance to work together at Harlem Financial Solutions way back in the day. But, John was saying the same thing you were there, Kelli Schultz, about the revival of the dot bomb. I think if nothing else, two things that jumped out at me on that was the absolute marriage of loyalty, data, and a network, would be one. And I think the other one is, coming into 2025, with all the turbulence that's been in the market around, the tariff factor, plus or minus, is it going to happen? How's it going to happen? What's going to happen to the economy? I think there's, it's hey, is fintech going to be okay? And I think if maybe that's extraordinary, but if that's anything, if it's at all representative of the interest in the market on fintech, let's just say fintech is back.
It's going to change shape, right? I think, and there's a lot of, ways that I think that's going to happen, right? But fintech is, I don't see any downturn in this market in our lifetime.
Right. Kelley Michalik, any thoughts on, not necessarily Built, but just interest in the market? Obviously you guys have had investor interest and so, but that could be, again, you guys could be a really extraordinary case, but do you think it's sort of representative of some excitement in the market, or again, you guys would have been kind of early days of this, because that was in late last year coming into this year, right?
Late last year coming into this year, yeah. But if you think about where we were even just that short time from where we are now, it's incredible momentum. And we've got more interest now than we did then. And so it's really been just an incredible ride. It's been 8 months, 9 months since our Series A. And, we're just in a completely different place now. So the momentum is there. And I don't think it's just for us, right? All of our partners are seeing the same thing. So it's timing, right? It's great place to be, good time to be here.
Yeah.
We see inbound interest on the private side on probably a weekly basis. So there is, I still think, a lot of money. Look, there's a lot of unspent capital investment out there. And I think everybody's excited about fintech. I think people are excited about payments. That has been a trend for a number of years. I don't think it's abating, but I don't know. I think there's plenty of money that's looking for its way in. I'm sure Lumen had no shortage of suitors when it came time to raise money. And that's indicative of, let's put it this way, I'm not concerned.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I wouldn't be either. So, hey, I've got a question for Kelly, Sam, if you don't mind.
Yeah,
so,
no, jump right in.
Kelly, so I am so curious. So you've got a marketing background, really impressive, history there. And so you came over into the fintech space, but now you're in the commercial side of the business, which is really, really interesting to me because I think as an industry, we have not done well with that segment, right? From a commercial banking perspective, commercial digital banking, and then, kind of getting into payments, and there's so much paper flying around everywhere still and all of that. And I'm curious about the shift from marketing to commercial. And I think I like it. I think I like it a lot because, I think half the problem and why we're failing out there is because there's some sale to be done, right?
For sure. There's such a big shift that's happened, right? So I started my career, on the sales side. It wasn't until about 15 years ago that I flipped to marketing. And I thought, what am I doing here? Right? Like, I'm not a marketer, but we had a new product line. We needed a marketer. We were looking for a unicorn, right? Somebody that had deep experience in the product, knew the sales team, et cetera. So I finally raised my hand and moved over. And I think that child's eye helped me think differently, think out of the box, et cetera. And I think now with the ability for us to be truly personalized in everything that we do, right, what technology is giving us, we flipped. So marketing and the storytelling and the personalization, human touch is entryway in to good client experience, good, lasting, trusted relationships. So that just now goes into the sales process. It's like one continuum versus these segmented things. So back in, I think it was November, when I inherited sales, I was like a kid in a candy shop. Like, okay, wait, we can finally break down these barriers and actually put the prospect or client first in this experience and really lean in from an empathy perspective. So I've loved every minute of it.
Yeah, the commercial element's interesting to me too because and from the bill payment perspective, we looked at things like a consumer needs things, and then a small business needs a few more things, right? A couple of little twists and turns in the product, and that helps a small business. And then to get into the commercial level, you need more things, right? But I always thought this broken, siloed kind of perspective on how to move, through that growth path, was part of our problem in the industry, right? If you think about it, I'm a consumer, I'm an entrepreneur, I start a business, now I'm a small business, and now I'm going to go raise some money and I'm going to, pull some private equity in behind one of my companies, and now I'm a big business. And, as bank or credit union, you want to keep my, business, and you want to grow with me. And, how does that continuum kind of go so that I don't just have to jump ship, abandon all my history and switch products around and all that kind of thing. I can just kind of grow along the way. And I felt that was really broken in the industry. I never got a chance to fix it, but
Yeah, that's definitely, when we look at our commercial banking product, that's one thing that we are really focused on, right, is exactly what you just said. Humans are humans, whether they are doing work for themselves, you mentioned you had 3 kids. I have 3 kids and 4 animals too. So we have more in common than just the name. So we should talk about that later. But, whether we're a parent, a child helping our parents, right? Or to your point, entrepreneurial, small business owner, that we're still the same person. So we need the experiences to be easy, integrated, and adaptable, right? Because in all of those realms that I just mentioned, what's happening today is going to be different than what's happening tomorrow and next month. That's one thing we know for
Love it.
sure.
Love that you're focused on that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll just throw in real quick that Kelly, when you took on the full kind of go to market of marketing and sales and kind of revenue and kind of all of it, right?
Yeah.
When I thought, yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense because it reminds me a little bit in bank and credit union land, maybe a little bit in fintech land, where you have this, chief experience officer, or where they would, roll it up in commercial banks, roll up to get out of this whole head of commercial lending and head of treasury and go to what would be like a president or some type of role that oversaw the whole pipeline. Because to me, it is sort of indicative of how now with digital first exploration and how we all go try to get smart about things before we ever enter the pipeline in an official way from the seller's perspective. By the time we even get to that pipeline, many of us are already knee deep in content, and it's almost like the pipeline has changed a little bit. There's still some aspects of it that are the same, but that marketing where marketing left off and where sales started, or vice versa, or whatever, has all become a blurry. It's an interesting soup, I guess I would say, and so it actually made a lot of sense to me. I just don't know, candidly, in banking, fintech, if most CMOs were sort of hired or had that track where they had the experiences that you had, in sales. So it's almost like there were, in many cases, sales and marketing were set up. You read about this all over the place, that it's some battle in the sky, but it just seemed to me like it was different tribes, people that, like one person oversaw events and brand and was a cost center, and one person oversaw a pipeline and bunch of gunslingers, and they were going out trying to get money, and they were different culturally.
Very siloed. Yes.
So siloed. And there's so much content and books written about exactly that battle in the sky you're talking about. And quite typically, the trajectory typically is like a CRO will inherit marketing, or marketing will roll under a CRO. And I obviously have a biased view, but I think then your marketing department becomes transactional and sales support versus strategic and client experience focus. So when you look at our funnel or our campaign plans, it's all integrated, right? We're creating pods where marketing and sales own accounts and are working together. And we're no longer doing like old school marketing, like fill out this form and maybe some BDR will call you and bother you. It's the last person you want to talk to. So we're really rethinking the entire experience. And we're only able to do that because there's one person on top. I mean, you don't have that struggle or that fear anymore.
So I mean, to jump on you, I love that. I think this is something every org struggles with, right? Because marketing is under pressure. You're spending money, and I think this is a traditional thing, right? In the boardroom, you see marketing talks about leads and website traffic and everything else, and the sales guy's rolling his eyes or gal, and like, well, where are my bookings, right? And so I think at the end of the day, and I'm curious how you solve for this, Kelly. Like, this is, by the way, I think there's a similar, as a former CPTO, I think there's a similar problem with like product and engineering, because it's like my analog there is always, you're in the same canoe, right? Engineering's canoe, if it's going down, guess what? The whole boat is going under the waves, right? So like, you've got to row that boat together. And I think this is so much the same example. The way we solve for it ultimately is we all sign up for for bookings. And there's a marketing driven bookings element, but my marketing leader is also tied to the overall bookings number. That's how I solve for it. Because I think you're right, Kelly. Like, you either have to have one chief that's like running the whole show, or you got to find a different way to kind of stitch them together. My marketing leader is also a former sales leader, so that sort of helps. And I think you've got that background too. That helps a lot. But how do you guys solve for that? Like, do you guys metric the same, or what's the idea?
We talk about engagement, right? So we don't do MQLs out the door. We don't do website visits out the door. We're very account-based, right? So one thing I love about this industry is I can define my market, right?
Yeah, it's
I
a
know,
finite market. Yeah.
oh yeah, and I know who is a best fit for Lumen, right? Because all of our clients have these similar characteristics and needs, and you can look at the market and say, okay, here's a group of clients like our existing clients. So we are measuring, here's our ICP, and with the technology available today, right, ABM technologies, et cetera, we know who's engaging in our content and at what level the account is engaging. So we truly get a 360-degree view of account XYZ. And then there is a very collaborative approach from the sales and marketing pod to say, okay, these folks are engaged. We need to reach out. We need to engage with them more and get them into the actual pipeline.
Love it.
But
You have
no,
account-based marketing in like pods. So you got a pod with like a set of targets. That's cool. That's
Yeah.
interesting.
yeah,
Very cool. So do either of you, I'm curious because I spent a good deal of my career working through distribution channels, which is a challenge in and of itself. Do either of you, rely on distribution channels to sell, or are you more direct sales?
I can jump in. So we have both, Kelly. We are fortunate, and this has actually gotten better since I got in the seat, and I'd like to take credit, but I think a lot of it's frankly just core banking systems becoming more open-minded. But we're resold by core banking systems in a lot of cases, which is, like, if it's on their paper, you're not arguing over who's, you know what I mean? It's
Right.
cleaner and easier. But we still drive the sales on our side. And then we have separately for some of our product lines, we're direct sales. So it's a bit of a hybrid. But I will say we're fortunate in the sense that, like, we have a bit of a tailwind that comes from being a preferred partner for core vendors for a certain set of their solutions.
Yeah.
It's super helpful. But we also, like, we're out there kind of, hand to mouth as well in terms of deriving direct sales.
Well, channel sales, if you can get it and you can get it to go, it is one of those things that, I mean, honestly, it's like a freight train. You couldn't stop it if you wanted to, once you really get it spun up and going. So, I love when I see model working like that. And I kind of sense that, Stephen, in your company. So I was just really curious how things are working today, because if you think it was difficult a few years ago working with core system providers or even digital banking providers to try to get, connected into those reseller referral relationships, 20 years ago, it was just total hell at that point.
I've heard all the horror stories, and, like, I'm super fortunate. I'm 2 years into this industry, but I've got guys on my team who are 25 years in. And I'll be honest with you.
There you go. They know
I'd be
everybody.
nowhere without those guys. And it's I'm fortunate to have them, but it's also, and by the way, the folks at the core banking systems have also been there for 20 years.
Right. Exactly.
But there's trust and there's relationship there. And so we've been the business has been a major beneficiary from that.
That's great to hear that model's working.
Well, I think also my sense of this is there's a tailwind on the category too there, Stephen, in the sense that when I started out in the banking business, and as you can probably tell, that wasn't recently, integration was a huge challenge. Guess what is still a huge challenge? It's like, we haven't fixed that one yet. And so there's still plenty of, there's some fixes, and you guys have been working on it, but it's what I found interesting is, as the supply or problem solvers in integration have, like, Stephen, you and then Kelly, members of your team, and then implementations or whatever, as those have gone up, the number of things that we're looking to integrate number of
It's like
systems that
going
are,
faster, I think.
Exactly.
Well, and now
Exactly.
you're at the point where the new solutions are more sophisticated. They don't just need connected data. They need like normalized aggregated data to do their magic. And frankly, that was behind the data acquisition, is being able to kind of provide that curated set of data, which, I mean, you go to a conference today. I mean, you go to all of them, Sam, I think. But I mean, that's always prime spot on the agendas today. The keynotes, right? It's all about data aggregating, making use of it. A lot of the new fintechs, they need that, but it's not just connectivity. They need aggregated data.
Exactly.
And they need a lake.
Exactly. And I think what's interesting about this industry, or at least I found it. So I started out in telecom, so and then came into fintech from there. And but what's been interesting all along is that while we've talked open banking for, I don't know, way too long before anything happened, and then we finally got some things to start to happen, and then it just took a long time to get things turning. But while we talked about all of that, still to this day, we don't have integration standards as an industry. And I still kind of stand back a little boggled that, at the fundamental levels, we don't have that. And it would seem like if we did, we could build the new stuff that we need to add on so much faster because everybody knows how the plug and play works. And we can do it in a uniform way that's, more cost effective and, just easier to manage. But it is a tough nut to crack in this industry.
It's such a mess because every core does things differently in terms of like different data, artifacts. And then within a given core, some of them, which are one of the benefits is how flexible they are. But you offer a flexible solution, and guess what? People are going to flex it. Now you've got a snowflake for every way that somebody's implemented a given core. And what seems like, I think what's interesting is the industry has had like some Silicon Valley folks come in the last few years, and I think they come in and they're like, they paint with a broad brush, like, oh, we'll solve this, we'll just do X, Y, Z. And they quickly get like ground down. And the optimism, you can kind of see the happiness drain from their eyes after they've been trying. It's much harder, right?
After they've had 5 calls where somebody says, well, it's complicated. Well, because I'll give you a great example from my past. Before I joined Cornerstone 13 years ago, I was asked by a large credit union that was a client of mine to join this consortium that was working on a credit union data standard. I suspect you guys know what I'm talking about. And I went to all the meetings. I was our company representative. We were all in. We were doing all these things. And somewhere late in the game, I asked my client, who asked me to go to this session because they were on the kind of the advisory committee of this group. I asked them, so how are you going to use it? And the CIO, she said, oh, we're not going to use it because we want to be different. And I thought, well, there you go.
That's tremendous. I love it.
And then you add things like, low code platforms and, things like that, right? That make the data architectures, flex even further. And so, I don't know that we're going to solve this problem. But I also think that, the US fintech industry is protected from the outside world. And I'll say that because any international company that tries to come in, their minds are blown. They've never seen anything like it. It's not like that in anywhere in any other landscape in the world. Like our community banking landscape is here. And I think that does cause this little fintech circle to keep going around here in the US and, keep kind of turning more opportunity, for the entrepreneurs that have figured that out or those who are brazen enough to tough it out long enough to figure it out. Right. So I'm so glad we've got you guys coming in because we need fresh perspectives in this space. And for sure.
I was just thinking, so as you guys were talking, right? So coming from the travel tech industry, I only spent a year there. So prior to that, it was HR tech, but they had solved this, right? They have to because of all of the travel agencies, airlines, airports, et cetera. However, even though they've solved this, only a few were benefiting from it financially. So now all the new entrants are figuring out how to work around that. And create their new thing. So it's everything just seems so, we are looking for these solutions, but there's other problems to solve past that. So if we can leapfrog and learn from those other industries on how to do it right the first time, I think we'll be in good shape.
I think standards are going to be like really challenging just because, I mean, to Sam's point, like who's got the incentive to drive the standard? And if it's not the customers, you look at, I mean, so I spent time in telecom way back, started my career, I worked for Motorola for many years. And that's a great case in point, right? In Europe, everybody got on the same page. They came up with a standard called GSM and they did their thing. In the US, you had fragmented standard. Everybody picked their own different spectrum. And it took like decades of watching how successful Europe was for the US to kind of get on the boat and like standardize.
Exactly.
There's no, but the thing is, there's like no constituency that really benefits, other than the market as a whole, right? And so, I mean, candidly, that's kind of like one of the challenges we're trying to solve for. And Kelly, you made a good point. Like, foreign entrant comes in and is like just freaked out. That's actually a group that we talk to on a regular basis, where it's like, hey, we can, we're trying to create a decoder ring, right? Where it does become easier. And I think the idea is agnosticism is key. Like, this can't be provided by somebody who's got a dog in the fight. No core is going to do it. No individual fintech's going to do it, or business system. And so, but, having almost a universal player to try to, normalize and create a single point of entry. I mean, that would be.
Well, and yes. And Stephen, back to your earlier point about how you have veteran people in your team that have kind of lived in the trenches. One of the things that we've done considerable amount of advisory work for companies that are headquartered overseas, whether it's Europe, India, et cetera. Several of them, and many of them have been through multiple iterations of attempts to make market entries. And one of the things that I'd love to tell you that there's been widespread uptake of our recommendation on this, but this is one of them that I think many of them have been culturally challenged by. And that is, they tend to have sales leaders here, and they sometimes tend to have product leaders here, meaning they live here. But what they often don't have is an implementations leader here that is empowered, authorized, a decision maker that can fix problems.
That can deliver that last mile, right?
That can deliver that last mile. So it gets stuck there at the end. But so we've identified integration, we've identified data, we've identified organization, marketing and sales work. So I think we've done a good job of identifying like some things that are either, I wouldn't call them, they've been breakages out there that we see some promise on. I'm curious, if for my guests, what's something you guys see right now in the market that you think is working really well, or that you're really jazzed by? I would just love your take on anything because I think as entrepreneurs and business growers, as you all are, you're used to identifying problems and trying to find solutions to them. But have you seen something and you're like, yeah, that's, what, this is working, or this is great, let's double down on it. And I'll open it up. Stephen or Kelley Michalik, any thoughts on that?
I mean, I mentioned earlier, what we are seeing in terms of openness from core banking systems, and I've heard like all the horror stories. So to me, that's like a great trend. I think that's going to serve the market well. It's going to serve, frankly, at the end of the day, it's going to serve consumers well, because I think it helps our clients do a better job of putting together the system that's going to help them deliver for their clients. And, they're going to need to do that, right, to compete with the big banks out there, because we're like not winning the war right now. I think, if you look at the data, and I think that's the other thing that excites me is we're sort of at a moment where like some of the AI that's available is going to help our clients who are, I think, smaller and more agile do some cool things that people care about, right? Like personalization in the banking experience, and maybe some insights, around how they're applying AI to optimize their operations, which the big players in the market, the biggest, it's going to take them longer because they're slower. And I've spent time there. I spent time at a Fortune 500. I know how slow it is. So like, I think what inspires me the most is the ability for AI to kind of leapfrog, help our clients like leapfrog and maybe start turning a tide of this deposits war in their favor, especially amongst the younger generation. And you're starting to see stuff where like AI is doing some just for me personally, like I think it levels the playing field of like, I'm, these Excel jockeys who know all the SQL queries, they can do anything with data. But now natural language model, you put it over your own data, holy smokes, you can like get real sensible answers out of it. Turn that around to these guys and what they can do with their stuff. And I think that's exciting. And I think we're at the tip of the spear in terms of like what can really happen there. So,
being able to differentiate that way too with, our community financial institutions are often, they have niche markets that they're serving, right, in many cases. And so being able to kind of wrap those solutions around that niche market and really go deeper into that market, whether you're targeting ag, you're targeting, whatever you're targeting, I think is really cool. Personalization, beyond just the individual as well, into market segmentation, components.
And also,
Yeah.
I think, I might have a contrary view, Stephen, that, I think the community banks are gaining traction and starting to win the war.
That's great. I mean, I'm delighted to hear it.
I mean, when we're kind of diving into this in a deep way, and I think speed to market, to your point, is one of the key differentiators, both from a reactive and a proactive perspective, right? So, Kelly, to your point, we can do things that are more community-based, right? We can enable and empower our financial institutions to react to things like the Texas floods, right? In a faster way. So when everything is changing and unpredictable all around us, I think our clients have a unique ability to respond faster and in a more personalized way to individuals that they serve, as well as to those segments, right? And so we're starting to see a lot of examples of that and how that's building more and more trust while that trust is eroding on the big banks. So I think we're going to see that.
By the way, I love that because that to me is an example of what community institutions are great at and what is like part of their core DNA. And hopefully that translates into that person experiencing that, referring another client or maybe their friend who's coming out of college. Hopefully they're like in their 20s. But Kelly, I'm curious, like, do you see the same thing happening? Because that's existing client trust and stuff. I guess when I was describing kind of like arguably losing the war, I'm thinking about when folks are coming out of college and they're choosing who to bank with. Coming into this industry, I would have assumed these young people who care about the world and like all their, philanthropic causes, they'd be choosing community institutions versus the biggest banks. And we're just not seeing that as much. If you're seeing that pivot, I'm delighted. That's frankly something I've become passionate about. We're passionate about it as a business. I think we all need to kind of lock arms and figure out how to move that needle,
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I do think that the way that these younger generation, the younger, newer bankers, right? And I have some horror stories on my two. I have two in college, and then but when they
You're close to this.
You got experiments in the household, right?
I could tell you some stories, but when they experience fraud, which we actually had with one of our college students, and I think college students are becoming a big target for fraud, actually, because they're a bit more naive and newer to this. Because I hear a lot of stories when the girls are over. But I think when they experience that, and then they are not taken care of the way that they're used to being taken care of in any kind of issue, they are searching for other answers, and a more hey, don't make me come into a branch, or don't make me feel like I've made a mistake, but help me through this because this is all brand new.
That hits close to home for me as well. My wife had her purse stolen, and someone impersonated her at a major top 6 bank I will not name, and they cleaned out her account so the person just went to the teller station over and over again. And you think to yourself, how could that happen? And we tried to pursue it, and it went nowhere, and it just felt like nobody cared. And I just think you would never experience that at one of our clients, right?
100%. I had a situation with fraud on our account, and they made me go into a branch. Okay, so fine. I made an appointment. I went into a branch. And then, and same thing, top 5 mega bank, right? I went to the branch, and then they sat down and called the 1-800 number that sent
Isn't
me
that
to.
hilarious?
I was like this. I don't know how you can do this with a straight face and, think that
That's
this
the culture there, though, right?
You've heard of multi-channel and omni-channel, right? You just got omni-channeled, Kelly.
So
That's hilarious.
you know what?
I mean-
What's really cool though, if we think about it, these are the stories we need to get out there from
Yeah.
a marketing perspective in order to drive the attention of this generation to community banking institutions. We need to tell the horror stories, and how do we apply that in our marketing? So I don't know. I'm fascinated by who can earn the primary financial institution status, right? Fascinated. I've always been fascinated by that. And, I think, trying to get to college age students or even younger than that, with some of these messages like, for example, heaven forbid you add an extra zero to that transfer you made through PayPal. Good luck. Getting help with that.
Well, I think if there's one thing, one of the takeaways, I covered this a little bit at the session I had at Finovate spring in San Diego, was community institutions, small to mid-size, whatever you want to call that grouping that's going up against the mega banks, is just working on solid digital content to go along with their digital banking and digital origination and sales capabilities to top of back to our earlier thing about how the pipeline, the funnel in fintech, it's all one thing. And so just making sure that all those nudges and self-help things are out there for folks to do. And listen, I'm looking at the time here and I realize our time has gone so fast, but I also know that you guys are super busy, and I want to make sure that I'm not being rude and keeping you from another meeting here that might be coming up at the top of the hour. So I want to make a couple quick comments here in closing, and then thank you all. Just real quickly, I'd like to do a quick tip of my hat to the soul of Barb McLean. Barb was a guest on Fintech Hustle at Finovate Fall last fall, and just a couple weeks ago, tragically, she passed away at a very young age, leaving behind a family and a lot of others who are missing her, including yours truly. Stacy Bryant and I, along with Danny Payne from Jack Henry and Nick Evans from Circle Collective, had the episode that we were on Times Square in New York. I'm remembering it last fall. Barb was the CEO of a company called Velocita. She was the co-founder. So she was an entrepreneur, but she was a longtime senior vice president at Coastal Community Bank, vice president, I think 15 years plus at Solero, which is an industry provider, Canadian industry provider. She had something called the Fintech Playlist. You can go check it out on LinkedIn in her last several episodes, where she matched up things that she heard in the industry with songs. And I was very honored to be in a couple of her liner notes over the years as a student of liner notes. And so I wear my Barb McLean tribute Fintech Playlist shirt in her honor. I am grateful and thankful to have known her and to have worked with her both on Fintech Hustle and in this industry, just like I'm thankful for Kelley Michalik and Stephen Baker and Kelli Schultz, not just joining us for the podcast today, but also for just being helpers like Barb was, focused on just getting information out there that can help people get things done. And so I want to thank my guests, all three of you, Kelly and Kelly and Stephen, for joining us today on Fintech Hustle, and appreciate all of you joining us today.
My great pleasure.
Yeah,
Happy to be here. Thanks
and,
for
well, I guess we'll see all of you out there on the road and in a Fintech hallway somewhere near you. Peace out.